Okay, we start with our first speaker, with whom we will be having the opportunity of speaking about resource mobilization and donor mapping. That I think is something really interesting for all of us because one of our main tasks working as an NGO is always like trying to get new resources for our organizations and to with those funding being able to have local impact. Okay, we will have the opportunity to be today with Recadina Webi, and she's the founder and lead consultant of the Dotted Eye International, which offers resource mobilization, donor mapping, and organizational development services with over 20 years of experience delivering impact across Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and Latin America. She has helped international NGOs, UN agencies, philanthropic foundations, and local organizations mobilize over 150 USD million, as has led several bids, including a single multi-country consortium bid exceeding 1 billion USD, one of the largest of its kind in the sector. Recadina is particularly known for translating complex and shifting funding environments into clear, actionable strategies that organizations can execute. She has trained and mentored over 500 professionals in resource mobilization, donor mapping, proposal development, and compliances, working with organizations including UNICEF, the African Union, WF, FVSO, and WRE, to mention a few. Her advisory work spans resource mobilization, strategy institutional strengthening, climate and health financing, and she is trusted by both emerging organizations and established institutions to strengthen their funding pipelines and build their international capacity to sustain them. Thank you so much, Recadina, for being here with us today. It's a pleasure to have you here and to have the opportunity to, learn from your experience, your know-how. I will now introduce you here. Here you are. Thank you so much for being here. I don't know if you, yeah, there. I don't know if you can open your mic, and then the floor is yours. We are here to enjoy this workshop.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was a very good introduction. I'm excited to see in the chat people from Turkey, from Benin, from Kenya. I'm from Kenya, so I'm happy to see someone from Kenya. And I look forward to taking you through this session. So I'm going to share my slide and we can start. Just let me know once you're able to see it. Oh, sorry. It went to the wrong page.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, good. We can start. So I'm excited for this bootcamp, and I'll be taking you through resource mobilization and donor mapping. And for this session, I'm going to do a systems approach. So if you forget everything that I say, you can write down if you have a notebook, if you're taking notes. Just remember, this is a systems approach on resource mobilization and donor mapping. And to start us off, we're going to go into Menti. So if you're using your phone or you have your laptop and you have your phone with you, you can scan that QR code and you can respond to the question. So the question is, what are you expecting in this session? What topics are you expecting? So I'm going to leave this slide and move to the Menti. I'll stop sharing this and share something else. Oh, sorry. Can you see my screen? Are people having challenges? Yeah, the results are coming
Recadina,
in.
I think like, can you share like the link again just
Results page.
for everyone? Like, I don't know if they had
Oh,
enough time to
okay.
see it.
Okay. You can use the code. When you go to Menti, just menti.com, put the code 13036712.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
13036712. Can you see the results on your end? What I've
Yes.
shared on the screen? Yeah, so I see 14
Yes.
people have responded.
I think if we put start presentation, it comes up like bigger, perhaps.
Okay.
Perfect.
Good. I'm seeing resource mobilization, how to make project proposal, diversify funding, my people, those are my people. How to make projects, source of funding available, resource mobilization, info for beginners, fund sources. Just keep responding. They're coming in. We are at 24 response. Donor topic matching is coming up. Donor mapping is coming up clearly. We want to know how to map our donors. Yes. Resource mobilization, agriculture fund sources, learn how. Yeah, let's keep responding. The information on the QR code is here if you missed it. Donor topic matching. Financing. So financing something it jumped. About proposal writing, income generating. Income generating, yes. Hello, someone just said hello. That's interesting. Okay. As they keep coming, so we'll cover most of these topics. We'll not go into the depths of proposal writing. I see there's a topic here, people are asking on proposal writing, but we'll cover resource mobilization, diversification of funding, yes, strategic donor relationships, yes. Trying to see useful tools, yes, we'll cover useful tools. We'll cover reserve funds building. I can talk about that. Finance, different resources for something. How to make project proposals. So we'll not go into the depth of project proposal writing, but I see that it's a topic that keeps coming up. Yeah, but I think the strategic donor relations, resource mobilization, donor mapping, those are the big words because they've been repeated severally. Those ones will be covered. Yeah, so I think I'll stop sharing and we can go back to the slides. I get a sense of what you're looking for, which is helpful. Sorry, I need a minute. Okay, good. Yes, I was changing it to presenter view. Now, these are the topics we're going to talk about. So we are going to talk about the foundations of strategic resource mobilization. We'll talk about how to know your resource gap. Because if I meet you as an organization, you need to tell me, I am raising 1 million in the next 3 years. You need to know very well the amount of funds that you are raising. We look at resource mobilization trends and why trends are important. We look at the strategic resource mobilization cycle. I like to call it strategic. We're not just mobilizing resources. We're being very strategic about it. We look at resource mapping. I saw many people call it donor mapping, but here we are looking at resource mapping. So we're not only looking at donors. Donor mapping is a subset of resource mapping. So we are looking at the wider scale. And I'm glad I saw someone talk about income generating activities, which some of which will be covered in the afternoon, but we'll look at what are the resources that are available out there. We look at developing your strategic resource mobilization plan and the implementation of it. So most organizations develop strategic resource mobilization plans, but the implementation is where they fail. So you need to do both. And then we look at a practical case study of an organization that has been able to actually diversify their resources. So why is resource mobilization and donor mapping important, and why do we find this a challenge? I would like people to maybe put in the chat, and Celia can read some of them. But just to give my thoughts on that, resource mobilization and donor mapping is a survival of your organization. Without mapping resources, without fundraising, you have to close shop, and it requires a lot of investment. So that's why it's a little bit challenging for most people. And then there are the time, resources, and skills that are required. And another big challenge, obviously, is rejection. If you've applied to applications, you know, like it comes a lot of mental health challenges, because you get rejected a lot, especially when you start putting in out applications. So that's why we find it as a challenge. I don't know, Celia, any comments? You want to, anything on the comment, or why people think?
Well, it's just starting to come in, like Jeff Wills just said, resource mobilization is the heartbeat of the organization.
Yeah.
And I think some others might still be thinking or writing.
Okay. Let's give it like maybe 30 more seconds. What do people think resource mobilization? Why is it important? And why do we find it a challenge? Please feel free to type in the chat. Anything?
To ensure sustainability and scale up, to ensure the longevity of the organization, for program diversification, sustainability, ensuring partnerships, and shrinking spaces for NGOs is an important issue, says Farhat. They're all coming in very fast. They want to find organizations who can complement your strengths, leveraging each other's comparative advantages. It helps you grow, and you have to match the value of your company. Helps focus efforts than being half-hearted in approach. Sustainability, and people are saying it is just difficult to find funding and to convince also the private sector. Those are more or less, I think, the thoughts.
Okay, thank you. That covers most of it. So we'll go into what I call the resource mobilization and donor mapping problem tree. Normally, when I do this training, we normally go into groups and actually do this as an exercise. But I'll just go through it so that it's very clear. And I'm sure most of the organizations here, these are some of the root causes of the. So here, basically, a problem tree has, like, the brown side is the roots. This is basically, assume this is a tree. So the brown side are the roots of the tree. And then the trunk, or the middle part of the tree, is the chronic funding gap and resource instability. And then the bluish side is like the branches. So these are the effects. So the root causes bring out the consequences of the branches. So like, imagine a tree when it's growing, when you pour water, if you don't feed it, it doesn't, the branches don't thrive, yeah? So, but here, remember, we are looking at, kind of being negative, we are looking at problems. So it's a problem tree. I'll just go through some of them. One of the key problems, what people are seeing right now, is a shift in global priorities, as you know, most countries are now thinking bilaterally. So it's my country first. Has been a lot of aid cuts, as you're all aware. So there's that shift in the global landscape that is a root cause of chronic funding gap and resource instability. And then organizations also go through skills and capacity gaps. I'm going to give you a very good example here. So I met recently a founder and CEO of a particular nonprofit, and this particular founder has a mismatch. So he does want to grow funding, but he has basically, and I see this in a lot of organizations, they have all the other skills are covered. You have a finance manager, you have a communications person, you have all these other skills, but for fundraising, you want to get an intern or you want to get volunteers. So there's always that skills gap that we see in the sector. So one of the things how you to overcome this, you have to hire professionals, you have to have dedicated resources. It takes money to raise money, and then you have to invest in your team's capacity. And that's why I'm excited for all of you who are attending this training, because it's one of the ways where you're building up your skills on how to raise resources. And then there's the issue of brand and visibility. It's very important as organizations to have good brand and visibility. In these days of social media, yeah, it's good to have a website. It's good to have some social media pages, even if not all of them. Be on LinkedIn, be on Facebook, post a few times what you are doing, because by the time what most people don't know, actually donors do a lot of research, and they go and check out which are possible organizations that we can work with. And so if they go and Google you and they find you only have a Facebook page, it's not well optimized, yeah, it doesn't work for you. So that can actually cause a chronic funding gap. And then there's over-dependence on single donors. I cannot overemphasize on this point. One of the reasons why people have chronic funding gap, you find most organizations depend on one single donor. If that donor changes their priority, you're done. And that was in an organization which we had that challenge where we were depending on one single donor. This was in the eye health sector. And they woke up one day and they say, we are no longer supporting eye health. We started scrambling and running around. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to over depend on one donor. And then there is a weak value proposition. Weak value proposition can be a root cause for your chronic funding gap, especially when you're putting in applications. And to give you a good example, I worked with an organization where they called themselves climate experts, but in their application, they did not even have one experience. They never ran a project on climate. So you need to have a very good value proposition. If you're calling yourself an expert in women and girls issues, you need to have like 10 or more experience of what you have done in this area. And then there's a lack of a dedicated resource mobilization budget. I think I've already mentioned that. You need to have a budget. It takes money to raise money. And then there's poor resource stewardship. We'll go through the end-to-end cycle of the resource mobilization process. So once you receive the money, are you stewarding this money well? Because if you are not, this becomes an issue, because that particular donor may never want to work with you again. And that causes the chronic funding gap. And then there's unclear strategy and no systems and structures. As I said, this is a systems approach. If I meet you in an elevator and I ask you, what's your fundraising strategy? It needs to be very clear. So you need to tell me something like, we plan to raise $1 million US in the next 3 years. We plan to diversify our funding so that we are looking at other sources of funding that we don't currently have. Maybe another aspect of the fundraising strategy could be putting in systems and processes that actually help us to fundraise better. So we've seen the root causes of fundraising that bring the chronic funding gap, and what are the consequences of this? So the consequences of this is you find many organizations start chasing easy money. So you see a call for application, you've not prepared this, probably 2 days to submission, and you still apply. Why? Because you don't have systems and processes in place. You did not know about the call when even it was being discussed, because most donors nowadays put in processes where they try to engage the public before putting out a call. So your challenge is you don't have good systems. And then it causes talent drain, because your team is, the morale of your team, they have burnout. Remember, you're chasing easy money, so you're putting in applications for everything. It causes donor fatigue and loss of trust. There's inability for you to scale, and there's reputational damage. So I'll just want us to, again, go to Menti quickly, because I want us to understand what are our problems. Remember, when you go to, what are these things, like Alcoholic Anonymous, where people are trying to stop using alcohol, the first thing they normally say is, my name is Recadina Webi and I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, it's owning it. So we need to own why are we having chronic funding gap issues? Why is my organization in this position? So it's about owning it. And so we'll again go to Menti, and this time, let me go back. I'll stop sharing. I have to share another screen.
In the meantime, for those that last time also couldn't join the Menti, you can start answering in the chat if you cannot join that platform.
So the question is, if you could have a magic wand, if I could have a magic wand to fix one fundraising problem, what would it be? I'm trying to look for the code. Let me present a bit. Okay. Did I share my screen?
Right now, it's not showing.
Okay, let me share. It's this one. Can you see my screen?
Yes, and now I think if you hit the start, yeah.
So we are owning our problems. If I had a magic wand and I could fix one issue in my organization, I could fix one fundraising challenge, what would it be that I would fix? So the results are coming in. We have priorities, donor matching. You'd fix lack of expertise, proposal writing. You'll fix low capacity. I completely agree on that one. You'll fix visibility. The people want to fix their visibility. So the Menti code is on the screen for those who are not able to get it. It's 28852143. If you go to menti.com and you're asked for a code, you enter 28852143. And we're becoming here magicians. I mean, if you could just make the world better, right? If you could make our fundraising problems go away. Yeah. So break short finding cycle. Strategies coming out very clearly. I like that. Yes, we need to strategize. completely. PR and communication, interesting. Low capacity, visibility of work, lack of expertise, communication. Strategy is coming up clearly. Strategy and communication. Most people need to improve on their strategy and their communication. Someone has entered the Menti code. No, it's allowed. It's allowed. Branding and visibility. So the key ones are strategic application, branding and visibility, low capacity, strategy and communication. Those are the key ones. We have here donor preference, budget for mobilization, strategic idea. There was something being the right, it keeps moving. Wanted to see that one.
Here in the chat, Farhat
Weak
also says
leadership.
more specifically, I will try to
Mhm.
get 5-year funding for core functions and then build on that foundation. And someone else is also saying lack of domestic resource mobilization strategy.
Strategy is coming up. Branding and visibility is taking over though. Branding and visibility and low capacity. I completely agree because working with organizations, I've seen this low capacity is a big issue. We need to increase our capacity of fundraising, proposal writing, strategic application. I completely agree with that. Low capacity. Any more on the chat?
Yes, Arnold also says identify your priorities and aligned with funder priorities where not able. And well, Ezekiel is talking about blackmails from competitors and former staff. Not really sure if I'm understanding that correctly, but
Okay. Thank you so much for waving your magic wands. We'll now go back to the presentation. Thank you for sharing what you would want to see. It's very important to know where your problems are and what is it that you want to see change. So I'll just show this. You can see my screen?
yes.
Okay, good. So now that we've set the background, we know what are our challenges, we know what are the root causes of these problems, what are the consequences. Now we are ready to run. So we're going to go through the first session, which is the foundations of strategic resource mobilization. And I'm insisting on strategic. So what is strategic resource mobilization? I have to note this. Okay. So it's the tactful act of increasing organization funds and other resources. Remember, it's not only funding. There are other resources that you can actually look at. For example, maybe it's an organization that can offer you free premises or rent. There are other gifts in kind or goods that you're given in kind. And I see some of these international and government organizations are very good at this. So they ask people to donate clothes or whatever. So through those other resources, they're able to sell them and actually get money. So it's the tactful act of increasing organizational funds. And why are we talking about being strategic? So what is it about being strategic? It's being goal-oriented. Remember, you cannot come up with a strategic resource mobilization plan if you don't have a strategic plan. First, as an organization, you need to have a strategic plan. You need to have clear thematic areas of where you're operating. And then after that, that's when you come to fundraising and strategic resource mobilization. It has to be intentional and not reactive. What we are saying is we have to stop putting in application for everything. You have to be very intentional. And that's why in the process, people have the go, no go processes so that you decide what you're going for. It has to be focusing on long-term value and sustainability. You have to have prioritization and smart allocation of resources. And you have to have consider the broader environment. So what's going on around me? That's what it entails to be strategic in mobilizing your resources. And so I've talked to different founders, organizations, even international organizations. And one of the key things that you need to know is the donor universe. So when you're doing donor mapping, you need to know what am I looking at, yeah? Because you find most of the time you end up doing a small scope of donor mapping or resource mapping because you're not looking at the wider environment. So you need to know what are these categories of funders and how do they fund. So we'll go through some of them. And I know I saw someone was, one of the responses was basics of fundraising. So some of you are experts, you already know this information. But being that we are a big crowd, there are those that maybe don't know. So we'll just go through them. So the first one is bilateral donors. When you hear bilateral donors, just know it's government to government. So it's one government, not necessarily giving money to a government, but giving money maybe to an NGO in another government, but it's money that's flowing from government to government. And remember, government to government, it's money that's coming from actually taxpayers. So we have there, it's grayed out a little bit, but we have examples like the Department of State, where USAID was now put in. It's under the Department of State in the US. We have FCDO, which is the UK government foreign affairs arm that looks into aid. We have BMZ, we have CEDA. So these are the examples. One thing you need to know about bilateral donors is that they give the largest grants and they have very strict compliance mechanisms. They require you to build relationships and position. Obviously, they do request for applications that are published periodically. And one of the ways you need to know about winning this type of applications is that you need to build your relationship with these staff members who work in these agencies. And then we have multilateral agencies. When you hear multilateral agencies, just know we are talking about the UN bodies. So we have their examples as UN Women, UNICEF, and UNDP. And then we have private foundations, family foundations, that kind of thing. We have, for example, the Gates Foundation, the Ford Foundation. We have Wellcome Trust. These ones work on specific thematic focus. So even you imagine if you are a rich person and you wanted to give out money, you'll probably have it very clear. It's probably something you've gone through, like you find someone would start a foundation for cancer because probably they have a relative who had experience with cancer. So like they normally have it very clear. So they work on very specific thematic areas, and then they often invite letters of interest in their process, and they are very big on impact because they want to achieve this thing, and that's why they're putting their own money into it. And then we have corporates who normally work just to build what do I call it? So you remember corporates work with customers. So you have to look at it from that angle. So they have what we call shared value. So for them, for you, you're approaching them obviously as an organization wanting to raise money. But for them, they're looking at it at a different angle. So they're looking at how will I reach my customer? How will I increase my profits, etc. So you have to keep that in mind. And then we have pooled funds or global funds. For example, the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. We have the START Fund. We have some women fund, Global Fund for Women. I believe that's what it's called. So there are some pooled funds that are put together. Like even in the NTD space, neglected tropical diseases, we have some funds, like there's one called END Fund. So its aim is to end neglected tropical diseases. So if you're in that space, you need to know like there's normally funds that are put together for a specific objective. And then there is domestic fundraising, which we don't normally use a lot. But there are some governments that have funds, like in Kenya, we have a youth fund run by the government. So it's actually another source that you can actually get income. So how does this help? Most organizations, when they do donor mapping, they don't consider what is a big basket. So these are all some of the areas you can look at, yeah? So when you're doing your donor mapping, you need to go to each, like a bilateral donor, and look. So let's say, for example, I'm working in women and girls. I look at which donors are working in women and girls, which ones are working in my geographical locations. And then you come up with a very long list, because donor mapping, remember, is always the basis of a strategic resource mobilization plan. So once you're able to scour the internet, scour your different networks and resources, you can be able to come up with a list of even 100 donors within that universe, so that you know who is working in the same area as I am. And then I'll go to just to give you some tips on how to apply for this. I hope that is clear. It's small font, but we'll just work with what we have. So for bilateral donors, all bilateral donors have a strategic plan. You have to check their strategic plan and ensure that you are aligned. So for example, you cannot go to FCDO and apply for quantum mechanics. I'm just picking something random. I've never had them fund quantum mechanics, though they do have some innovation funds. Or because they cover quite a wide array of topics. So you have to check also, and you check in your country. So there are two ways to do it. They normally have like the global strategy, and then they have the in-country strategy, and in the in-country strategy, they have outlined the locations where they are working in. You may find in your country, they're not working in all the locations. So as part of the mapping, you need to know this information. And then one key thing about when applying to bilateral donors you need to know is that they value track record. It's very rare that a bilateral donor, unless it's an innovation fund and it's allowing like people to put in applications on new ideas and new things, then they will not expect you to have a track record. But normally they expect you to have a track record. And they will say this track record has to be within the last 3 years or the last 5 years. And then sometimes they actually expect you to have done some research because they want to be evidence-based. And there was a time we were putting in an application that limited us because this organization had not done research. So you need to also be aware, like you see all the planning that goes before you put in applications. And then they put out applications through requests for proposals. And these ones, you have to monitor their websites. So the best tip for that is just to bookmark. You need to be bookmarking their websites so that you know, and you go through them periodically so that you know when the calls come out. You also need to be following their market intelligence. For example, FCDO has early market engagement, where you can know about a call before it comes out. They normally have some of them budget forecasts so that you know way beforehand they are planning to put out this particular call. And then there's a relationship investment. I cannot overemphasize this. You must have relationship with the staff that are working at these different agencies. So it's good to meet them often, like quarterly, just to know what they're thinking, what's changing, etc. But you must invest in these relationships. And then lately, there's a lot of requests for consortium type of organization. What is it called? To put in applications as consortiums. So you have to be consortium ready. You have to have MOUs, talk to different partners before calls come out, so that you are ready when they do. And then we have the multilateral agencies. I'm going to go through them very quickly. So obviously, most of them being UN organizations, they're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals framing. One of the other things they like to do is to work with local NGOs, so that positioning is very important. We have private foundations. They look at thematic alignment, evidence of impact. Like impact is very big for private foundations. We'll share the slides and you can go through some of these characteristics because we need to start moving quickly. And then we have corporates. The thing about corporates, you have to know what's their shared value. Because for them, they want to reach their customers. And so you'd find the reason why, for example, in Kenya, we have Safaricom Foundation as an example. The reason why they would want to work with you is probably because you'll go in the rural area and you'll do a medical camp. And within that medical camp, they will have on the side another tent where they'll be reaching out to their customers, knowing what are their pain points, what are their issues, etc. So when approaching a corporate, don't think about me. Think about what you have to figure out before approaching them. What is in it for them? Why would IKEA Foundation want to work with me? Why would MasterCard want foundation? MasterCard Foundation is into financial inclusion. So if you're not talking about financial inclusion, you're not talking the right language. So you just have to know what is in it for them. And then we have the global funds, domestic, regional governments. So these ones, you'll just go through them when you have the slides. And then let's talk about new financing mechanisms and local giving. So remember, we are in the thoughts of doing resource mapping or donor mapping. So once you've mapped all the other ones that we have talked about earlier, you need to come and map also these ones. So we have crowdfunding, we have impact investing, we have blended finance. Some of these are covered in the afternoon, so I'll not go into details. We have corporates, we have diaspora giving, we have government or domestic. And one thing I need to emphasize on these ones. So for example, crowdfunding, I worked in an organization where 70%, and it's not little money, 70% of their income came from crowdfunding. So they had programs across like 30 countries across the world, and they were purely able to raise a lot from crowdfunding. But what was their secret? Their secret was their network. So your network is your net worth. You don't want to run into crowdfunding when let's just talk about maybe social media. When in the social media space, you probably have 10 followers on Facebook. You'll not be able to raise much money. But if you have like 1 million followers, and I think this is a very good example of what Mr. Beast is doing. If some of you know Mr. Beast from America, he has the Mr. Beast philanthropy. His network is actually his net worth, because he has so many followers that if he puts out a cause, there are many people who will contribute to it. So when you crowdfunding is a very good strategy, but you need to invest in it. It's not a short-term strategy. It's mainly a long-term strategy. So when you're building out your strategic plan and resource mobilization strategy, that's something to consider. I'm going to jump impact investing, blended finance, but these are some things that are coming up which you need to be aware of and you also need to include in your strategy. There's diaspora giving. If you've worked in a different countries, you always have Americans in Kenya or Burundians in Dubai, that kind of organizations. So you can actually reach out to them and they can give funds and that they can remit back home. So diaspora giving is also a strategy that you can apply. So this graph here basically shows the distribution of giving by source. This was in 2025. And that's why I was insisting on crowdfunding or individual giving, because crowdfunding and individual giving are just like two sides of the same coin. You will see here that around 62.8% of all funding. Now, this is looking at the US market, but is a very good representation of what happens to the rest of the world. If you're looking at fundraising, just know, like 50%, 70%. Other data has shown around 70% of all funding comes from individual funding. So it's very important to have a strategy on how, in the long term, you'll be able to grow your crowdfunding or individual giving. We see here around 20% comes from foundations and private foundations. We have around 9% comes from legacy estates. Legacy estates are those people who, before they pass on, they say that once I pass on, like 50% of my wealth will go to a particular charity. So this is mainly US based. I don't see that in many other countries. Yeah. And then we have corporates, which is around 6%. So this figure does not have bilateral funding, but bilateral funding is around 13%. The government to government that we're talking about is about 13% of all individual giving. So if you compare that to, what is it called? Sorry, it's 13% of all giving. So if you compare that to individual giving, which is 70%, everyone is crying money. There are budget cuts. There are all these challenges. You've not scratched the surface, my friend. There's a lot of money out there that is sitting and waiting for you. So it's just about being strategic. So going to the next session, in the next
Just
topic.
to
So
know,
I wanted,
Reka, that you have about 1 hour left now
okay,
because you asked me to let you know.
okay, thank you. I need to go quickly. I don't want to eat so much into the Q&A. So I normally find these key principles and practices of strategic resource mobilization important because most of the time people do fundraising or resource mobilization without thinking about these principles. And these principles are at the backbone of what you should be thinking about and what you should be doing. And one of them is you must ask. You cannot imagine how many organizations, I just go to their website, they have a contact form, or they have an info email, and I would write to them, and they always come back to me. And I've gotten so many opportunities just simply by asking. So most people always think, let me just wait when they put out a call for applications. You don't have to wait. Most organizations have actually a way you can reach out to them. And this can be a basis of you building your relationship. For example, you can check on LinkedIn or other places and see who are the staff working in this organization. And you can reach out to them and ask, when are you planning to put out your next call for application? And they will tell you, by the way. So you must ask. You can't know what's going on if you don't ask. The other one is you need to have a personal approach to the donor. So in terms of mobilizing resources, they say fundraising is friend raising. You have to have friends. You have to know people in these funding agencies. I'll give you a very good example of something that happened to me that I always like to talk about. Sorry about that. So there's this time I went to meet a donor, a bilateral donor, and I did my research. So I went to this lady's Facebook, and she had so many pictures of dogs. And I used to own a dog. I used to own a Japanese Spitz. And so I knew about dogs. So when I went to that meeting, I knew I had to bring in dogs. So we started, we started the meeting, she was the head of the organization, and I was telling her, I've just seen a Japanese Spitz on the road when I was coming. And that changed the whole conversation. I was going for a 1-hour meeting. For 40 minutes, we talked about dogs. I kid you not. So she was telling me how she was working in another country. She had to fly in her pet dog from her country to that country. And she was telling me all the challenges she went through, all the regulations and the licenses she required just to move it from different countries to reach where she was working, because she was an expert in that country. And so by the time we finished talking, like we felt like we knew each other. and it was a personal approach. So before you meet donors, Google them, know what they like. You may find it's actually something you also like. And in that conversation, you are able to quickly build a relationship. And so we were going there because I had seen a call for application from that bilateral organization. And in 3 days, I saw they awarded it. And so my question, the reason I asked for a meeting was, you just put out a call for application and you've awarded in 3 days. What's going on? So they basically told us they have a framework agreement. So they have framework agreements with like 5 INGOs. So when they put out the calls, it's not for the general public. It's for those 5 or 6 INGOs that they have a framework agreement with. And in that meeting, I was able to know that they were planning to put out another call for application to get people to join their framework agreements. And so this lady was the one even pushing for my organization to join that framework agreement. Just because I took the initiative, I went to her Facebook and checked what does she like. So there's that personal approach that is preferred. Because remember, these people meet a lot of people. Yeah, they have so many NGOs that are coming to them. And then you have to understand the donors' viewpoints. I keep saying this: if you're working with corporates, wear their shoes. Don't wear your shoes. Forget about yourself for a minute. Just think, what are they, when they're looking at me as an organization, what are they seeing? So you have to really crack that. You have to demonstrate impact on people. That's very important. You have to show the needs and use of funds. You have to always say thank you. You cannot imagine how being courteous really helps. Even when you're getting constructive feedback from the donor, say thank you. It's always important to be courteous. You have to build long-term relationship and be accountable and report back in a timely fashion. Don't delay on your reports, etc. So these are some of the principles in terms of resource mobilization. I'll quickly go through the principles of bilateral agencies. Yeah. So these are the government to government, the FCDOs, the CEDAs, the AFDs of this world, the Agence Française, the Développement, that's the French agency. So for them, they look at commitment. So you cannot be an organization where today you're doing climate change, tomorrow you're doing GBV, like you're just jumping, you're following the money. You have to show commitment on a particular topic. So if you're in whichever thematic area, education, just do it, be committed to do it for the long haul. They sense a lot if you're jumping around and following the money, because even when they're asking you for the track record, you may not have it. Again, you have to be persuasive. And I like to emphasize on number 3, learn how to deal with rejection. Because I met a lot of people who just don't know how to work with bilateral donors because of the rejection. You will get rejected. I get rejected. Everyone, I'm sure. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Oh, give me a minute. I'm sure all people in this call, however, received a rejection letter from the bilateral agencies. So you just need to learn how to deal with rejection because it's going to come. And there's a time I was doing a training and someone told me like they were not able to deal with rejection. So they completely stopped applying for bilateral funding. You don't want to do that because as we've seen, bilateral funding is about 13% of all the sources of funding. So it's a big funding pool and it gives large grants. So it's just important to know how to deal with that. And just let me give you some tips. One of the things is not done a lot in our sector is mental health. Yeah. So rejection is a mental health issue. You need to have within your teams probably a meeting quarterly or monthly, whichever the frequency you decide, and talk through the rejection that you've experienced. Be real. For example, I know personally when I get rejection, sometimes I cry. I'm not going to be ashamed to say that here. I mean, you've put your effort, you've put time and everything. So it's good to have someone to talk through it, your supervisor or someone within your team, about this rejection. Because recent statistics show that there's a lot of mental health challenges within the fundraising sector, and people just never talk about it. And then you have to show persistence, you have to be truthful, show patience and tact. I'm not gonna speak through this because they are very straightforward. And then you have to have your donor contacts and you look for opportunism. So in terms of looking for opportunism, when you meet a bilateral donor, look at what are they thinking for the future. Always look at what are they thinking for the future, because that's how you get opportunities to now grow with them. And they say that 80% of all funding is raised from existing donors. So how do you do that? Is by looking for new opportunities or new ways of working with them. This is about capture planning. I think I'm going to jump that. So this crafting your capacity statement and your fundraising CV. So this is very important to have a capacity statement for your organization. So in terms of who are you, what do you do best, what are your results? It's like a one-pager. What are the systems and capacity issues that you have or strengths that you have, and what are the partnerships that you have? So if you just, for example, even put this into AI these days, helps. It can give you a rough draft of something you can start editing. Don't use the AI one, just start editing from that one. And it's very important during applications to always have like your capacity statement with you. And we've come to the end of this session, and I would like people maybe to comment on the chat. What is the one thing that you will do differently from this session? What is it that you have learned? I'll give you about a minute so I can also have a break to take some water. Thank you. What is the one thing that you will do differently in your organization? Thank you.
I think in the meantime, while people write, because it always takes a little bit, can you perhaps answer one question that I see here on the chat? Reka, you want to take maybe one question while people reflect on this?
Yes, sure.
So, Muhammad was asking how to find these links to donors for an organization to learn about their strategy plan, like how to do this research.
Okay. That's a very good question. So first, I would say Google is your friend. Just Google FCDO's strategy for Turkey. If it doesn't bring that, you have to go to the FCDO website for the particular country. So you have to go, first of all, you can start from the embassy. So you look at the UK embassy in your country. You can start there. They always have a page dedicated to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, which is the ministry that hosts all the bilateral agencies. So that's how you do it. But if you Google, this information is normally there. The challenge is you may get outdated information. So always they have years. So if 2025, 2027, just make sure you have the most recent one.
Also, I see that someone is also asking if you have any particular reflections when it comes to being a social enterprise in their resource mobilization strategy, if there's some particular reflections for that particular model of nonprofit.
Yes, definitely. You have to be a social enterprise in the coming. In, I mean, things are already changing. We can already see it. There are donor cuts left, right, and center. So there's the income generation side of things. So you have, and when we get to the practical example, you'll see it very clearly. An organization that has completely diversified their income, including having social enterprise, like they have, I think, 3 social enterprises. So yes, definitely a strategy. And one of the key things you need to think about is, or when you're getting into this, is to do like a market, do some market readiness or analysis, because most of the time you find, I hear from a lot of NGOs saying, "Oh, we can consult in this particular area, or we can do," but how much will that raise? That's the question. You want to raise a lot of money that you can actually make impact on, but just do some market analysis. Don't just jump into it. Do some cost benefit analysis. If I was to get into this social enterprise, how would it pan out? And definitely include it in your strategy.
Amazing. Thanks, Alaka. I see that some people here already started putting some things. Um like that some of them say I'm going to change the way to approach the different donors. I'm learning that everyone will go through rejection. I will embrace rejection and build on it. I will keep the whole team on track, identify when a member of the team is blocking the processes and address the issue immediately because many rejections were always on one individual in charge of a particular process. Um, and yes, so I think those were some of the comments. I don't know if you want to continue.
Yes. No, I want to appreciate the comment on the mental health because that's really a key one. If we can all include that in our processes, that's very good. Sorry, I'm trying to get this out. Okay. So we'll go into the next session. So the session 2, um, sorry. So we've done the foundations of strategic resource mobilization. We have about 5 sessions that I can go very quickly through. So we are going to go through knowing your resource gap. And obviously, we don't have enough time to know your resource gap in this meeting, but you must know your resource gap. And yeah, so we are going to go to the session 2, which is know your resource gap. And in this session, we'll talk about so what is knowing your resource gap? Is money or other support or aid needed to meet your organizational needs? And this is where you link to the strategic plan. Yeah. So remember, you have to come up first with a strategic plan and say, we are going to work in all these areas in the next 3 to 5 years. We're going to work in climate in the rural areas. We're going to work in agriculture space. We're going to work in women and girls, education, whatever it is, you need to have it very clear. And then once you do that in your strategic plan, the next thing you need to do is to ensure that you have your numbers. So how many people are we reaching? We are reaching 500 girls in schools, ensuring, or maybe we are reaching 1,000 kids, ensuring they have school meals. So once you have those numbers, you can now convert it into a budget. This is where I'm glad you guys had a financial session yesterday. So you know this better than me, but you have to have those numbers such that at the end of the day, you know, this year, don't be like vague. Have it very clear. This year I'm raising 500,000 US dollars. And know every month what is your gap. So far I've raised 100, I'm remaining with 400,000. So it's not something we can completely do in this session, but it's something that needs to be done as an organization as part of strategic resource mobilization. So what are we talking about? And I used to have this supervisor who always told me, budgets don't run programs. And I was like, he always says budgets don't run programs. The challenge with most NGOs, we know this donor is gonna put out a call. We'll put in an application. So always budgets are running our programs. We need to have programs that are running by themselves. You need to have a vision. Yeah, let's open the vision board. You need to have a vision and say, I'm working in Kenya, in, let's say, Nairobi County. I'm working in the slums of Nairobi County. And my vision is to move most of these people in these houses they are dwelling in into more decent housing. So like it's very clear what you are doing and what is the movement. And so there you have a program. It's not a budget running the program. It's the program running itself. It's very clear what you are doing. So you need money for programs, for overheads, for rent. You need money for technical assistance. You can receive material goods, especially I've been in health programs where there's a lot of medication being donated by these big pharmaceutical companies. So if you're in the health field, definitely look for that type of resource. It will help. You can need other types of donation if you know there's someone who can give you office space for free, seconded staff, volunteers. So you can map out all the resources that you need and then just come up with your numbers. So this one was a quick one because I don't think we can be able to fully cover it. But as an organization, just know how much you're raising in the next 2 or 3 years and always know what is your gap. So I've raised, out of the 3 million that I need to raise, I've raised 1 million, so I have a gap of 2 million. Always have that in mind. So we'll go to the next session. As remember, we are building our strategic resource mobilization. We have done significant donor mapping and resource mapping. We have looked into new mechanisms of funding. We now know our gap. And now we are going into the resource mobilization trends. Why are trends important? Trends are important because they inform your strategic decisions and they strengthen your efforts. In the days of social media, it's very easy to explain because if you know something has gone viral and your aim is to have your posts improve in terms of viewership, you just hashtag the viral thing, or you do the viral dance, or you do the whatever has gone viral. Just bear that in mind in terms of trends. So trends are things that help you better fundraise or raise your resources. So we are looking at the current trends. So in terms of the global funding landscape, we have from 2023 to 2025, the bilateral donations, or what they call ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, has dropped by, I think this is about, so from 2023 to 2024, it dropped by 9%. From 2024 to 2025, which I think is a season that has affected most people, it dropped by 17%. Yeah. So you see, like that pie chart we had where we have all the sources of funding, this particular funding source is shrinking. So what is your strategy? You know it's going to be very much more competitive in this area, and that's why you're looking at trends, because they help you in terms of coming up with your strategy. So there's going to be a lot of competition on bilateral donors. There's going to be general competition on other areas because everyone now is thinking, okay, maybe I can talk to private foundations. Okay, maybe I can talk to corporates. So it's just very good to bear that in mind. And then remember that 40% of NGOs report that they have spending gaps each year. So most people are struggling, yeah? And then this other important statistic here, 10 out of 10 applications, only one is funded, yeah? So, and this was before the 2024 budget cuts. I think this figure has now changed, yeah? So out of every 10 application, only one is funded. So the competition is high. And then 67% of donors are shifting to work with local partners. So there you can strategically put your organization to be able to be approached and work with these organizations. So obviously we have the audio volatility, we've talked about it, the localization agenda. There's a consortium preference. You need to plan and you put this in your resource mobilization strategy. If you're working in education, you look around, who are the other partners working in education? Start approaching them even before a call for application comes out. Have an MOU with them. So because consortiums will always be preferred. So you need to do that preparation upfront. There's digital and data. We'll talk more about that in the next slide. There's climate finance surge. There's a lot of money in climate. And I'm seeing nowadays many organizations are following the money. It's not bad to follow the money, but just make sure you have the expertise to demonstrate in an application that you can actually implement a project in climate. Then obviously blended financing is on the rise. That's why we have the discussion in the afternoon. You want to be sure you know this space and you can act in this space. So I have here another list of trends that I think is very important to go through. Sorry, how much time do we have left? The Q&A was
Right now it's about a bit less than 40 minutes. If
yeah,
we
I'm
go
going
like
to
10 minutes over time because of questions, it's no problem for me if it's no problem for you and the other people attending. But yeah, about 40 minutes, a bit less.
Okay. So we're going to delay the Q&A a little bit, if that's okay, because we have about 8 minutes to Q&A. So I'll talk about these resource mobilization trends. And I'll start from the bottom, artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. I normally track a lot of calls for applications and I share them on my page. You should follow me on LinkedIn. It's called Recadina Webi. Recently, I had a few that I shared that went viral and people were surprised that, okay, so I can actually write to Oak Foundation anytime and they can give me money. Yes, you can write to Oak Foundation anytime and they can give you money. So it's good to know what's out there. But the reason I want to talk about AI and AGI, recently I put in an application for one of these banks foundations. It's global. And this particular organization I was working with did not win because we put in an application on circular economy. And when the results came and they were published, 80% of the applications were in AI and AGI. So you cannot miss this space. You need to take advantage of AI and artificial intelligence and artificial generative intelligence. Even in your application, try to sneak AI in there. Find a way of sneaking AI in there in your implementation, because this is important right now. Everyone is looking into it. Don't be left behind the way I and my team were left behind. There's another trend that's going on. It's called advocacy. So there's a lot of advocacy in different spaces. There are different things, policy, etc. Advocacy has been there, but it's really growing. There are many conferences that are held just to advocate on a particular issue, be it climate. Obviously, there's the COP. There are other advocacy mechanisms. So in your applications, put advocacy. Have an advocacy strategy. If it's aligned with the call for application, just have that. And then there's cross-sector collaboration. Guys, I started from down, sorry. There's cross-sector collaboration. Nowadays, you hear about One Health, yeah? What is One Health? It's the way the interaction between humans, animals, etc. We're not just looking at health. We're looking at One Health. There's also that climate, how it's affecting women and girls, how it's affecting health. There's all this cross-sector collaboration. So don't put your application with just one hat. Wear many hats. And then there's the innovative approaches. So in addition to AI, obviously is innovative. There are other innovative approaches that is a is a trend that you need to look at. Diversification of funding sources, everyone wants to diversify. And there's a new trend of competitions. So there was, for example, the MacArthur 100 and change competition. So there are calls for application that come out that are not really your traditional calls for application. They're going to award one person. They put it out as a competition, and they're going to award one person. So it's also good to try those ones. Capacity building is a trend, local fundraising and sustainability, environmental sustainability and ESG. We must talk about that because now there's the IFRS S1 and S2 that most corporates are supposed to report on. So if you're working in that space, you can always find a way to support these corporates through that. There's gender equality and social inclusion, information technology, consortiums we already talked about, impact and localization. So it's always good to know these trends. If there's any other trend maybe I missed, someone can add in the chat. It's good to know what else is out there. And later we can read them, but let's share trends. Trends are very important because that's how you build on your resource mobilization strategy. So we'll go quickly into the resource mobilization cycle. And this is the resource mobilization cycle. So in the resource mobilization cycle, you start with needs assessments and organization comparative advantage. So I'll talk about the first two boxes. The other one is organization-wide strategic planning. So before you come up with a strategic plan, you need to go to the community, to the area that you want to work in, and you do some needs assessment. And it goes back even to that social enterprise. Yeah, you need to do a needs assessment. You need to know what are the pain points, what do people need. Some of them are very clear. For example, if you're in school meals, you already know the schools don't have meals and kids are missing school because of lack of meals and they're not able to concentrate. But some of them need assessment. Most of them need assessment and you check comparative advantage. So once you do that, this is part of the strategic planning process. Once you do that as an organization, you come up with a strategy. So you have your organization-wide strategy. Once you have your organization-wide strategy, you know your gap, yeah? So you know we need, for us to achieve our mission, we need X number of millions for the next 3 years or 5 years, depending on your strategy. Once you're able to do that, that's when you come up with a strategic resource mobilization plan. And that's what we are talking about. So when you're coming up with your strategic resource mobilization plan, the first thing you do is resource mapping. You cannot do a strategic resource mobilization plan without resource mapping. You do very extensive resource mapping so that you know what opportunities are there, what can I tap into. And then once you do that, you come down, sit as an organization and prioritize. Because once you do that, I promise you will find a lot of opportunities if you do it well. So you have short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies. So you prioritize. In the short term, I'm going to put in applications for these calls that are expected to come out. In the long term, I'll have a crowdfunding or individual giving strategy. And then you implement. And before you implement, you have to have an action plan. So you come up with an action plan. In my team, this person is assigned this particular area in the strategy. This other person is assigned, etc. So you assign them. And then that's how you implement, because you have to have someone who is accountable. And at the end of the 5 years or whatever period your strategy is, you need to evaluate. You need to sit down and see what worked, what did not work. I cannot overemphasize. Like organizations which actually are able to get out of this funding gap, that's their secret. They're constantly evaluating. You need to constantly evaluate. You evaluate everything, even in the proposal stage, you evaluate why did it not work? What can we do better? So at the end of your 5 years of the strategic plan, you start again. Because things change. I mean, 5 years ago, artificial intelligence was not where it is right now. I just saw, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday, there was the first robot that went into the house, to the White House, a humanoid robot. So we're living in different times. So after 5 years, again, you do again a needs assessment, and so you go through the cycle again. It's a cycle of around 5 years, 5 years. But let me hone in into this third section, strategic resource mobilization plan. So remember, we're talking about a systems strategy, yeah? And most organizations, this is where we fail. Like I was giving you an example at the beginning. You have a finance system. Finance is a very good place to go back and give an example, or even procurement. Because you'll find most organizations have this process that every procurement must, first of all, have a requisition. Someone has to raise a need and requisition for the particular goods or services to be bought. The second step is for quotes to be obtained from the general public. Or if you have framework agreements, you probably need 3 quotes. So you must have those 3 quotes before you move to the next stage. And then the procurement committee will evaluate and make a decision on one of them. And then you'll go to awarding and negotiation. And then the particular thing is, if you're buying laptops, they are brought on board. And you must sign off that you've received it. Like, processes are very clear in most other areas, be it procurement, be it finance. But in fundraising, we don't have structures and systems. We don't have processes. So you need, if there's one thing if you forget everything, remember this one thing, go and put in processes. So I'll take you through the end-to-end process of strategic resource mobilization. So first of all, you have the pre-planning and foundation. So this is where you're planning, you're scouring the internet, you're doing your donor mapping, you're setting your goals. So in the pre-planning and foundation, one of the key things you must ensure is that you have constant donor mapping, constant resource mapping. What most organizations do, they hire someone, they do for them donor mapping, and they sit with it for 5 years. That is wrong. You need to do donor mapping every day. You need to have information on what's out there coming in every day. And so the way you put in a system or a structure around it is, first of all, you can use interns. I've worked in organizations where they hire interns and they're paying them minimum wage. And within that, they are able to share. Some of these interns are very good at scouring the internet. So they are able to share opportunities. They scour the internet and share opportunities. And so you have an Excel sheet or you have a CRM system where you put that information. So on a daily basis, you'll find that you have maybe your pipeline has around 30 opportunities that you're going to apply. There you know you are good. So you need to have a system of opportunities, looking for opportunities. It's a system you must put in place. And then you need to have strategy and goal setting. So in terms of strategy and goal setting, you need to have a system where you have a go, no go process. You have a process of, okay, it's fine. So these are the opportunities that we are aligned with, and they look like they're best fit for our organization. What is the process of us knowing we are accepting this or rejecting the other one? And then you need to have constant prospect research. So remember, you're not only looking at bilateral agencies, you're also looking at trust and foundations. So you're constantly, and especially if you start working in individual giving, you start looking at who are the individuals who can actually fund my organization. So you're constantly doing that. You need to have a process of relationship building. And we'll cover this a lot more in the next slides. But the trick to relationship building is you need, not only one person is building a relationship with the other organization. So if you're looking at, if you've done your strategy and you probably have IKEA Foundation as one of the organizations you need to approach, have at least 3 people. It's called tripartite relationship building. Have your country director, have your finance manager, and have one program person. Building relationship with the counterparts of that organization, so that if there's any movement in staff or anything, you still have your way in. So you must have a system and a process of building relationship. And then another one is proposal writing. There's a lot we can talk about that. You must have a process of, like the capacity statement we were talking about. You must have like pre-written. Most organizations that normally win and do well in proposal writing is because they don't do 100% of the writing when the call comes out. They do pre-writing. So have your evidence, have your context background, have your organization track record. There are sections of the proposal you can have ready at hand. So have those ones.
So now, Tereka, just for you to know, we have about 20 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. That's good. So you need to put a process of having that in place. And then negotiation, once you're awarded, the negotiation process, obviously, managing the grant, you have to manage the relationship, and then finally you do the reporting. But you need to have processes and systems for everything. So we'll jump into this section. I'll quickly jump. So this is where we are. We are in resource mapping. And then where can you get information about the funding opportunities? So most of the time, people just go and look at the internet. That's not what professionals and people who've been in this field for long do. We look everywhere. So we look into news blogs and newspapers. We look into, I'm sure most of you know this, you look at your peer organization, you go through the annual report and think, oh, they're being founded by IKEA. I should talk to IKEA because they have the same thematic areas. So you look into the peer organization annual reports, you look into websites, you follow large grants awarded. So if you hear there was a large grant awarded, there's subcontracting that may come through that. So you follow that, you subscribe to newsletters, and you follow through your networks. And I think for me, the key tip that has worked is bookmarking. So I bookmark a lot of opportunity sites. And right now I have like over 1,000 bookmarks. I've been bookmarking over my career. So it makes it easier to look for opportunities. And I'll give you a good example of a newspaper opportunity that I was able to follow through to the end. So there's this lady, she was so excited because one of the philanthropists in the US had written to her, and actually she thought it was a scam. She thought it was a scam email. So she shared on her social media that this philanthropist has actually written to me, and she wants me to manage funds on behalf of her organization in Kenya for and give these funds as sub-grants. Like, that is fresh information that you cannot find anywhere. Yeah. So I was able to reach out to her and set up a meeting, and we were able to come up with an MOU. So you see, like, I was way ahead of everyone else. By the time she even gets the money, she puts out call for applications, I already started the conversation. So you need to look at blogs and newspapers and read through the lines. Some of this, and I think it's in the next slide, some of this website like DevX, they put out a lot of information. And what I've seen work, if you have the staffing for it, is to have someone analyze news articles and share. For example, I saw recently an organization in the robotics, in the health robotics, was given $150 million by, was it the Gates Foundation? So obviously they're going to sub-grant that in the future. Yeah, so that's information that you only get in newspapers. So I just wanted to emphasize on that, because most people do not look at that, and it's a very good source of information that can put you ahead of the curve. I'll go to donor mapping and databases. I'll not talk much about this because you'll get the slides, but you can subscribe. There's so many you can subscribe to these days. You can subscribe to these ones. And then the other one I should talk about is AI. I don't know how many of you have tried to ask Claude, generate for me all the opportunities in the agriculture sector. You will be shocked what it will generate. You should use AI. I have used AI in donor mapping, and AI is really becoming good. You should definitely use AI. I was just telling it the other day to give me a list of donors in general operating support. And my prompt, the way I prompted it, because AI is about prompting, I asked it, can you check the grant databases of funders who've put out their grant databases and list for me all the ones that have general operating support in their title. It gave me a list. I was shocked. So definitely use AI. It's not the only one you're using, obviously, but it's part of what you will use. Yeah, I think I'll stop there, and we can have quick reflection. We'll not take a pause, but again, I ask anyone who has anything to type from that. What is it that you are going to change from today henceforth? We don't have much time on our side, so we'll keep going. So in terms of developing your resource mobilization strategy, there's something called portfolio planning and pipeline planning and management, yeah? You must have a portfolio. If your pipeline, right now has like 2-3 hours, you're not, 2-3 opportunities, you're not doing the right thing. I've worked with most international non-governmental organizations, and our pipeline was always very healthy. You'd find like there are 100 opportunities we've already tracked, and we know we are applying. Yeah, so your pipeline needs to be healthy. What we can say is around 30. If you have around 30 opportunities you are tracking, that's good, but you can always increase that. So that's how you know the health of your pipeline. The other one is this 70-20-10 rule of the portfolio planning, where 70% should be your core funding and you're getting it from your existing donor relationship. As I alluded to earlier, 80% of your funding will always come from existing. This is research that has shown 80% always comes from existing relationships. So the grants that you have now or in the past, those ones, they will give you 80% of your core funding. 20% in your portfolio, again, you need to check, do those charts and maps and everything. That 20% is going to growth. So you are talking about new donors, new business, something you've not, a new donor, a new opportunity, something you've not worked with before. And then 10% should be experimental or innovative. This is where we have the AGI, the innovative technology, the fun stuff. So always have 10% in your portfolio that is geared towards that. And then finally, I think I want to talk about what are the possible work plan actions. So we've talked about continuous donor mapping. You need to have strategic positioning. So you need to build relationship, always build. You can even give yourself targets. So every quarter, I need to build relationship with a new donor. And building relationship takes time. Either you find them from events or from your networks, invite them for coffee, take them to your programs. Just have a strategy on strategic positioning or building relationship. Possible other thing you can have in your work plan is a fundraising calendar or strategic events calendar. Just have a calendar January to December. These are the events that are going to happen. These are the opportunities that we expect to come out, so that it makes your tracking easier. And then you also need to deepen your relationship building and have a pipeline tracker. We're talking about your pipeline having at least 30 opportunities, right? I talked about tripartite donor relationship management, where you have relationship at 3 levels, not only at the country director level, and then you need to leverage your influential networks. We're going to talk about visibility and thought leadership. That's something you can put in your work plan, your resource mobilization work plan, that you'll be putting out thought leadership. For example, if you're in education, I know I use education a lot, thought leadership ideas on education, thought leadership ideas on AGI, artificial intelligence, like that. You need to build your internal team and capacity. We talked about having systems and processes. That's why you put it. You have practical fundraising systems. There are some applications that require you to be registered. So you need to think about those. So for example, the adaptation fund, they probably need you to have a registration with them or accreditation process, or those that have framework agreements. If you track them, you are able to put that in your work plan and action it. And then strategic consortia participation and impact tracking. So once you have, the only trick about work plan I can talk about is have someone responsible for it and have a review process either quarterly or periodically, so that you are able to know where you are, because what is not tracked will not get done. So I'm going to jump this section on M&E, but there's a toolkit that is going to be shared. And you can, it's very simple. I'm sure most of you are in project management. You can always create a strategic resource mobilization M&E framework. And I just want to jump to this case study. This is what excites me. So this is an organization that actually exists. And when it started, everyone thought it would just be a small organization. It will not grow beyond Kenya. It's called Amref Health Africa. You can Google it. And what I like about this organization is how they have diversified their income. So what I know, there was a meeting. It just didn't happen. When they started, there was a meeting and they called for a meeting as the board and said, how are we going to make our organization sustainable? You remember in the beginning, we were owning our problems. You need to own it and say, this is my challenge. How am I going to change it? Because they realized we are not going to be sustainable. So they asked, how do we make it? How do we become sustainable? And they had a meeting, they had floated ideas, and they implemented it. Again, implementation makes a difference. So what they have is what is called AMREF flying doctors. So these flying doctors within the East Africa region, for example, if I'm working, I'm based out of Kenya. So if I have my family in Rwanda, and someone gets sick, I just need to call Amref flying doctors and they will fly the person. Obviously, this is a profit-making business and they charge for that flying doctors. So obviously, if it's an emergency, they are treating you because they have actual doctors in the plane. They are treating you as they are flying you around to your home country. Yeah. So that's one of the income generating activities they have. Yeah. It's a whole business. They have the Amref International University. Yeah, it's a fully fledged normal university, but offering mostly public health courses. You can graduate, you can do your master's. That's a number 2 source of income. Yeah, they recently started Amref Health Innovation, which is a social enterprise. So all these robotics, you normally see that drones are flying medicine to different areas, or all this innovative technology in the health sector. They're doing that through that arm. And they have the Amref Sacco, which is a savings and credit cooperative, where they accept, what is it called? They accept deposits from the general public in terms of saving. So like those are already 4 sources of income. And remember, this started as an NGO in the health sector. They do have their normal NGO. So that I was talking about the subsidiaries and social enterprises, which is the orange side of things. Now let's go to the green one. So this is where they started. It's a health NGO. So they started with Kenya, and then they diversified, they opened other branches, but this is their core business. This is where they started. And then eventually now, if you go to the purple side, they have opened branches in Europe for resource mobilization, advocacy, and donor relationship. I know most of you in the sector know this. If you want to get UK money, it's good if you have a UK registration. If you want to get American money, it's good if you have an American registration. And that's basically what they did. So this is possible. It's possible for everyone to actually do it. Because I know AMREF, when they started, we all thought this small organization, but now it's a very big deal. So this is the end of my presentation. I'd like to hear the questions. Maybe we can take 10 more minutes on that if the participants allow. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Reka, for all of your insights. I see some comments here saying very powerful insights, and I mean, I completely agree. You talk so much also about your practical experience, which is super, super useful. Now for everyone, I know because throughout the time I saw some questions that we read before were in the chat. Remember to try to use the Q&A box for the questions. So just to clarify, for those of you that don't know, you have, on your screen, you should see three dots, and there it says more. And there you see the questions and answer box, and there you can post it. So I make sure that I don't miss the questions. So someone was asking about being a small scale organization, how to set realistic funding goals.
Do you want me to answer one by one, or you want to give them in batches?
I think maybe one by one.
One by one.
Also
Okay.
because people I see are some of them might be typing in, so
Okay. We go back to what we talked about, yeah? You need to run programs, not budgets, yeah? What are you trying to achieve? That's the first question. As a small scale, it's an NGO social enterprise. As a small scale organization, you need to figure out, maybe start small, start within your area. And you must have your numbers, yeah? I'm going to reach 500 children this year, yeah? So that's how you become realistic. Obviously, as a small scale organization, you know where you can reach. You can't say I'll reach 50 million. You'll be lying. Yeah. So just start there. Set out your program. Be very clear what is the program I want to run, and then budget for it. And then from there, you'll have a very realistic goal.
thank you, Reka. Also, someone was asking for a clarification about this diagram that you showed us for the statistics of giving in 2025. Was this a global statistics?
This is a US statistics, but what I mentioned is that it mirrors the global statistics. Let me go back to there. So what's the statistic that I know, 70% of all funding sources, if you look at any funding, all of them, 70% normally comes from individual giving. Yeah. So this is a US statistics. It's what I could obtain quickly, but this is looking at all funding sources. If you were to look at all of them, so here for the US is 62.8%, but globally, if you look at all countries, 70% normally comes from individual giving. To give you the numbers, is actually 1.3 trillion. 1.3 trillion comes from individual giving. You remember the picture we had, the current, what is it called? Bilateral giving is 117 billion. So obviously individual giving is more. Yeah. But to answer his question, is US only.
Yeah, and also as a follow-up, Khadija was also asking about if you have some examples or practical tips, specifically when it comes to this individual giving and how to reach this demographic.
Yes, I like this. So for individual giving, you must have your net worth. That's why we're talking about your network. That's why we're talking about Mr. Beast. Yeah. You and even Con Valores, they can tell you they have a lot of membership within their portfolio. And if they want anything, they can rally up because they already have people. You have emails, you have phone numbers. You need to get that information. So what I would say, it's obviously a long-term strategy. I remember there's this organization I was working with, and we had like 10,000 people in our email list that would easily that have clicked on our donate button in the past. But I would find that their donations was very inconsistent. So you need to write, obviously this comes with a lot of email marketing and that kind of things, but you need to have a list. You need to find a way to grow your network. Either I'm looking at it in the community. If you're community based, there's always a way you can collect people's emails or numbers, because you have to reach this group of people. So that's where I would start building a network.
Thanks so much, Recadina. I think that's also so powerful, what you were saying throughout the presentation of numbers and starting those conversations, that it is a matter of creating those databases and starting those contacts. We always say, yes, we are a network of 7,000 members, over 7,000 members right now of Con Valores Hub, but the amount of email marketing and the amount of people we have reached out in order to create this network is not just 7,000. Of course, it was like, I don't know, 20, 200,000 maybe people that we have contacted throughout the year in order to get this network now. So what you're saying is super, super powerful to keep in mind in order to, you apply to one, you get rejected by one, then of course you're disappointed, but also we need to think about those numbers. um, I see also a question about how to create resource management guidelines in alignment with the organizational strategic plan when it comes to a very local civil society organization setting.
Can you ask that question again?
Yes. Well, the person exactly was asking, is it advisable to have a resource management guideline that aligns with the organizational strategic plan in a local civil society organization setting?
Yeah, I'm struggling to understand what they mean by guideline, because most of the time people who have resource management or mobilization or fundraising guidelines, I see maybe those in the health, in the faith sector, and they put like, we cannot accept money from organizations that are in mining. We cannot accept money from pharmaceuticals. We cannot. So those is that the kind of guidelines he's talking about? Um, but I'll attempt to answer that question. I think I go back again to running programs. Yeah, it's just good to be very clear as a small organization. What am I trying to achieve? The problem is the challenge for most organizations is they don't know what they're trying to achieve. You have even like 5 bullet points. I'm going to feed 100 children in school meals. I'm going to help 50 women out of gender-based violence. I'm going to just have a list, like very clear bullet points. And then you can easily convert that into a budget, and then you'll know how much you're going to raise for, and you'll know it can now help you to now do your resource mapping and look even within the community, what are the corporates around there that you can talk to, etc., and then just map it from your local environment. I hope I answered that question.
Yes, thank you so much, Reka. And I think that was the last one.
Okay.
I think then it's perfect. Also, we ended up finishing up on time. Thank you so much once again, Reka, for taking the time to share your practical knowledge with us on how to create the strategy and how to think about different situations in our organizations when it comes to this resource mobilization. I think you can see some of the comments there already thanking you, and more of them coming in. Now, to everyone, I do want to highlight that it's very lovely when you write it in the chat, but we also have a feedback form that not everyone always fills in.